Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a dockside morning in Tudor England, where the smell of salt and tar mingles with the sharp tang of wood smoke from nearby houses. You hear gulls circling overhead, their cries sharp against the murmur of merchants haggling, sailors swearing, and apprentices clattering barrels along cobbled streets. The ships rise and fall with the tide, their sails furled, their masts like skeletal fingers clawing the sky. This is the dawn of an empire, though no one standing here yet knows it. To them, it's simply another day at the harbor, another chance to trade, to dream, to risk. And let's be honest, if you were dropped here, you wouldn't last long. The food is suspicious, the air is thick with smoke and sewage, and the sailors would laugh at your soft shoes and city accent. Yet, for all its roughness, there is an energy here, a restlessness in the air, as if the entire kingdom is leaning forward, straining toward the horizon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The docks hum with the pulse of ambition. England in the 15th and 16th centuries is not yet the empire it will become. It is a small kingdom on the edge of Europe, still overshadowed by Spain and Portugal, those masters of early exploration. Their galleons return from the Americas, heavy with gold and silver, their ports rich with spices, sugar, and silk. England looks on with envy, and envy has a way of sharpening dreams. You wander through the streets near the harbor. The smell of ale drifts from taverns. Laughter spills into the night. Inside, sailors brag of journeys, some true, some fanciful. Of seas so wide, a man could sail for months. Of islands where gold hangs from trees, of parrots brighter than stained glass. Merchants lean forward, hungry for profit, while gentlemen stroke their beards, imagining how far influence could reach if only they dared. Here's your historical fact. It is during this age that figures like John Cabot and later Francis Drake set sail under English banners, probing new coasts and charting new waters. Cabot reached the shores of North America in 1497, while Drake circumnavigated the globe in the 1570s, returning with treasure and tales that electrified Elizabethan England. And a quirky detail? Some of Drake's sailors, after circumnavigating the world, reportedly complained not about the danger or hardship, but about how much pickled cabbage they'd been forced to eat to prevent scurvy. Imagine spending 3 years at sea, fighting storms, Spaniards, and hunger, only to come home grumbling about vegetables. As for uncertainty, historians still argue how much the Tudors truly envisioned a global empire at this point. Some suggest their expeditions were opportunistic, small-scale attempts at profit and plunder. Others see seeds of a broader vision, that England must look outward to survive and thrive. Perhaps, like most beginnings, it was less about a plan and more about a hunger that found its shape later. You follow the clatter of carts to a counting house, where merchants lean over ledgers. Numbers fill the pages. Debts, loans, profits. Ships are expensive, risky, unpredictable, but they promise riches beyond imagination. If one ship fails, the merchant is ruined. If it succeeds, he could grow wealthy beyond measure. To spread risk, they begin forming joint stock companies, pooling resources for ventures too large for one man to bear alone. The clink of coins, the scratching of quills, the murmur of deals, all of it hums with possibility. Money is as much the engine of empire as sails or steel. Picture yourself on a quay, watching a new ship being prepared. Her hull is tarred black, her decks scrubbed, her ropes coiled. Sailors sing as they haul supplies aboard. Barrels of salted meat, dried peas, beer casks, and yes, more pickled cabbage. The ship smells already of sweat and tar, even before she leaves harbor. Her name is painted across her stern, bold and proud. To those watching, she is not just wood and canvas, she is hope. The wind shifts, and you find yourself in a grand hall, tapestries hanging heavy on the walls. At the head of the chamber sits Queen Elizabeth I, her gown gleaming, her collar stiff with lace. Courtiers bow, poets flatter, explorers petition. Elizabeth listens, weighing not only ambition, but politics. Spain is powerful, its armadas vast. To challenge it directly is dangerous. Yet Elizabeth knows opportunity when she hears it. She grants charters, licenses, permissions. England may not yet rival Spain, but it will nibble at its edges, testing, probing, striking when the chance arises. Here's another quirky detail. Elizabeth was so cautious with her treasury that she sometimes invested in private voyages, essentially becoming a shareholder in piracy. When Drake returned from his circumnavigation, she was one of his backers and profited handsomely from his plundered Spanish treasure. Imagine a monarch balancing statecraft and bookkeeping, smiling as her kingdom's coffers swelled from voyages, half exploration, half theft, and uncertainty. Did Elizabeth truly envision an empire where the sun never sets? Or was she simply hedging against Spain? Historians suggest she may have seen overseas ventures more as a tool of survival than domination. The grandeur of empire, the poetry of endless daylight, would come later, grafted onto these tentative beginnings. Night falls again on the harbor. The last light glimmers on the Thames, lanterns flicker in windows, and ships creak at anchor. You hear laughter from taverns, whispers of ambition, the splash of oars in dark water. Men dream of horizons unseen. Women sing lullabies to children whose fathers may not return. The air is thick with uncertainty, risk, and promise. This is the dream of expansion. Not yet the empire of red lines across the map. Not yet the boast that the sun never sets. But the dream is here, restless, impatient, waiting for the sails to catch wind. You close your eyes, and you can almost feel the deck rocking beneath you, the ropes humming in the breeze, the horizon beckoning. The story has only begun, and the sea is calling. The gulls wake you at dawn, their cries echoing across the harbor as masts sway gently against the pale morning sky. The tide runs out, and with it go men who may never return. You stand at the edge of a wooden quay, watching sailors heave on ropes, push barrels up gangplanks, and stow bundles of rope and sailcloth. The smell of pitch and salt clings to your clothes. A captain shouts orders, his voice hoarse from years of wind, while a boy scrambles up the rigging like a squirrel. This is no ordinary voyage. This is a ship bound for the new world, a place that fires imaginations like nothing else. You feel the air shift, not just the wind, but the mood. The Americas are no longer rumor, no longer the guarded prize of Spain and Portugal alone. They are becoming an obsession. Tales drift back across the Atlantic of islands thick with trees, rivers brimming with fish, fields where crops grow tall. To men living on thin soil in Devon or Kent, such stories are irresistible. The sailors board in ragged groups, some hardened by past journeys, others green, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Priests murmur blessings, merchants clasp hands, calculating risks against reward. Families gather on the quay, whispering hurried farewells before ships slip from sight. The sails crack like whips in the morning breeze, and slowly, the vessel noses out into the open channel. Here's your historical fact. English expeditions to the Americas began tentatively in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. But it was in the 1580s that Sir Walter Raleigh sponsored settlements in Virginia. The most famous, Roanoke, became the lost colony, its settlers vanishing mysteriously between voyages. And the quirky detail? Among the possessions left behind at Roanoke was a small engraved ring, found centuries later, showing a tiny prancing lion. Was it a symbol of loyalty or just decoration? Nobody knows, but one imagines a colonist clutching it for comfort as isolation pressed in. As for uncertainty, historians still argue over what happened to the Roanoke colonists. Did they starve? Did they join local tribes? Were they absorbed into native communities, their names and lives carried forward unseen? The disappearance remains one of the great mysteries of early empire. You sail with them now, days stretching into weeks. The sea is both friend and enemy, vast and unforgiving. Meals are hard biscuits crawling with weevils, salted beef so tough it splinters teeth, beer soured in the casks. The crew watches for signs of scurvy, swollen gums, bleeding skin. When it strikes, there is little to do but endure. Time becomes a blur of waves, clouds, stars. At night, sailors tell stories of sea monsters. Whales the size of islands, mermaids who beckon men to drown, storms summoned by witches. And yet, amid the hardship, hope glows. Each sunrise might bring land. Each gull overhead might mean a coast nearby. Weeks later, the cry goes up, "Land ho!" The ship shudders with excitement. Men scramble up rigging to glimpse a dark line on the horizon. Slowly, it rises into green hills, white beaches, forests dense as walls. The air changes too, warm, fragrant, full of strange birdsong. You set foot on the sand, your boots sinking deep, your eyes wide. The land feels alive, generous, endless. You walk inland. Trees tower overhead, their trunks thicker than any in England. Rivers cut silver paths through meadows. Animals dart through underbrush, unafraid. For a moment, you imagine it all empty, waiting. But it is not empty. People are here. Tribes who have lived for centuries along these rivers, who know these forests as well as you know your own hearth. At first, exchanges are cautious. Beads, mirrors, and cloth traded for maize, fish, or tobacco. The English marvel at pipes of curling smoke, at corn baked into flat cakes, at hammocks swaying between trees. Yet tension simmers, for these newcomers are not content with trade alone. They want land, permanence, dominion. Here's another quirky fact. Early English colonists in Virginia attempted to cultivate silk from mulberry trees, imagining they could rival China. But silkworms stubbornly refused, and the plan failed. Instead, tobacco became the cash crop, filling holds of ships bound for Europe. You can picture settlers sighing over stubborn worms, only to discover that smoke, not silk, would carry wealth across oceans, and uncertainty. Historians debate just how much the first native encounters were diplomacy versus misunderstanding. Some accounts emphasize hospitality, others conflict. Did chiefs see these strangers as allies, guests, or invaders? The records are few, the truth fragmented like broken pottery. You wander through a fragile colony now. Timber houses rise in clearing, their roofs thatched, their walls rough. Smoke curls from fires where women bake bread, men mend nets, children chase each other between huts. Life is precarious. Crops fail, storms batter, supplies dwindle. Each winter tests the settler's will. Each summer brings uneasy negotiations with neighbors. At night, the settlers huddle in prayer, their voices trembling but determined. You sense it. These are not just voyages of exploration, but beginnings of something larger. Each frail hut, each planted field, each scar on the earth is a seed of empire. Picture a return voyage. The ship groans under cargo. Tobacco bales stacked high, barrels of timber, crates of animal skins. The crew is gaunt, but their eyes glitter with relief. The sea is cruel on the way home, storms lashing, sails torn, but the thought of English harbors pulls them onward. When they finally dock, crowds gather to see the goods, to hear tales of new lands, to marvel at parrots and plants never seen before. The air in London hums with possibility, and Elizabeth listens too. Each ship that returns proves England's reach. Each report from across the Atlantic sharpens the dream. Spain may still dominate, but England is learning, daring, expanding. As night falls on this new world, you sit by a fire on the sandy shore. The forest looms behind, dark and watchful. The waves lap steady, whispering of distance. Around you, settlers murmur, some with hope, some with fear. The air smells of wood smoke and sea salt. The stars wheel strange overhead. You realize you are standing at the threshold, not only of a continent, but of an empire that will stretch far beyond imagination. You close your eyes, and you hear the sails still cracking in the wind. The gulls crying, the voices of explorers whispering to a queen who dreams of horizons. The harbor smells different this time. Spices, cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, black pepper. The scents drift across the breeze like a promise, sharp and sweet, exotic and faintly overwhelming. You walk along the quay in London in the early 1600s, and you hear men whispering of a company newly formed, a joint stock venture like no other. Its name is painted on the charter signed by Queen Elizabeth I herself. The Governor and Company of Merchants of London, trading into the East Indies. To most, it is simply the East India Company. The company is not yet a mighty empire in itself. It is a collection of investors, merchants, and captains, pooling risk and dreaming of fortunes that glimmer on the other side of the world. They speak of spices that fetch their weight in gold, of silk shimmering with colors richer than any tapestry in England, of tea, still only rumor, not yet a staple. The maps are vague, the oceans wide, the dangers immense. And yet, men lean forward when they hear the word Indies. The first voyages are tentative. You watch the ships load, barrels of salted meat, dried peas, biscuit and beer, enough for months at sea. The crews number in the hundreds, each man hardened or hopeful, each face turned toward horizons unseen. The captains carry letters of trade, gifts for foreign rulers, and more quietly, cannons bristling at their sides. Commerce and conquest sail together, always. The voyage east is brutal. Months pass at sea, storms batter sails, disease thins crews, scurvy gnaws at gums, bodies grow weak, rats scurry bold across decks. At night, the stars blaze unfamiliar, guiding them along the African coast, around the Cape of Good Hope, and into the vast Indian Ocean. The air grows warm, the nights thick with insects, the waves heavy with monsoon winds. Here's your historical fact. The first East India Company voyage departed in 1601, commanded by James Lancaster, and returned with a cargo of pepper that sold at a profit of over 200%. That single voyage convinced investors that the risk was worth it. And the quirky detail? Lancaster, during his voyage, had the odd foresight to store lemon juice aboard and ordered his crew to drink it regularly. While other ships were devastated by scurvy, his men remained relatively healthy. Imagine weary sailors choking down sour gulps, cursing at first, then slowly realizing their gums were not rotting like their neighbors on rival ships. As for uncertainty, historians still argue how much Lancaster's lemon experiment truly influenced the company at the time. Though effective, the lesson was largely ignored for decades, scurvy continuing to plague sailors long after. Why the cure was overlooked remains one of history's frustrating puzzles. You step ashore now at Surat, on the western coast of India. The air is humid, heavy with spices, sweat, and smoke from cook fires. Markets sprawl in every direction. Baskets of pepper piled high, bales of cotton cloth shimmering white, heaps of ginger and turmeric glowing like embers. Voices rise in countless languages, traders bargaining, sellers shouting, buyers murmuring. The English walk among them cautiously, their pale faces standing out, their manners uncertain. They bow before Mughal officials, their gifts presented with careful deference. Silk, velvet, and silver cups are laid out as offerings. The Mughal Empire is strong, its rulers wealthy, its armies vast. The English are not conquerors here. They are supplicants seeking permission to trade. Treaties are negotiated, factories, trading posts established, warehouses built. For now, England's empire in the East is fragile, dependent on the goodwill of kings far greater than their queen. Here's another quirky fact. Early English merchants were sometimes so overwhelmed by the wealth and splendor of the Mughal court that they sent back letters describing elephants draped in jewels and nobles wearing gems the size of pigeons' eggs. In London, readers could hardly believe such tales. To them, India sounded like a dream spun of silk and gold and uncertainty. Scholars still debate whether the English truly intended conquest at this stage or simply sought profit. The East India Company's charters spoke only of trade, yet within a century, they wielded armies, governed provinces, and levied taxes. Was empire always inevitable? Or did it creep slowly, step by step, from trade to domination? The company expands eastward. You picture their ships anchored in Bantam, in Java, their sailors sweating under tropical suns, their warehouses stacked with pepper and nutmeg. They clash with Dutch traders, rivals who are equally determined, their ships bristling with cannons, their ambition just as fierce. Battles at sea erupt, contracts are signed and broken, alliances made and abandoned. Trade is never peaceful. It is a war fought with ledgers as well as muskets. Back in London, the company's ships return laden. The docks erupt with crowds, the scent of pepper filling the air. Merchants count coins with shaking hands, investors smile, the Queen herself takes her share. The profits are staggering. Soon, more ships depart, more posts are founded, more treaties signed. The company becomes a kingdom in all but name, its banner fluttering as proudly as any flag of crown or country. Picture the boardroom in Leadenhall Street, where directors sit beneath maps stretching across oceans. They speak of profits, of territories, of risks. They wear fine coats, but their decisions will shape nations. Behind their talk of spice and silk lies power, quiet but immense. Here's one more quirky image. Some East India Company officials in Asia became so wealthy that when they returned to England, they were nicknamed nabobs, a corruption of the Indian word nawab. They built country houses with gilded halls, their fortunes drawn from faraway lands. To neighbors, they seemed both envied and suspect, their wealth carrying whispers of corruption and excess, and the uncertainty. How much did these nabobs truly represent empire? And how much were they anomalies? Were they the face of Britain abroad, or eccentric outliers? The sagas of empire leave us unsure, their legacies tangled in admiration and critique alike. Night falls over the Indian Ocean. You stand on the deck of a company ship, the air hot and still, the sails limp. The sea glows faintly with phosphorescence, as if stars have spilled into the water. The crew murmurs, some asleep, some watching. Their eyes turn toward a horizon they cannot yet see. The empire of trade is only beginning, its sails just filling, its future vast and uncertain. You close your eyes, and you hear it. The rustle of silk, the clink of peppercorns in barrels, the whisper of spices carried on the wind. The East has been touched, and with it, the empire grows. The air grows heavy and sweet. You step onto a shore where the sand glitters white as bone and the palms sway lazily in the humid breeze. The Caribbean is unlike anything you've seen before. Its seas turquoise, its skies endless, its nights thick with stars so close they feel like lanterns hung just out of reach. But beneath the beauty lies labor, harsh and unrelenting. For this is the land of sugar. You walk along a path lined with cane fields. The stalks rise taller than a man, their blades sharp, their sweetness hidden within fibrous hearts. The sound is constant. Machetes striking, stalks falling, carts creaking under the weight of harvest. The sun beats down, sweat runs freely, and the air tastes faintly of molasses. The Caribbean has become the beating heart of empire's appetite. At first, the English presence here is uncertain. Spain dominates, claiming vast swaths of the New World. But slowly, through war, piracy, and opportunism, England secures footholds. Barbados, Jamaica, Antigua, St. Kitts. Each island becomes a jewel, not for gold glittering in rivers, but for sugar sprouting from soil. Here's your historical fact. By the 18th century, Barbados alone was producing more sugar than all of Brazil, becoming one of the richest colonies in the world. Tiny islands, scarcely visible on a map, poured wealth into London's coffers. And the quirky detail? On some estates, planters kept sugar birds, small, brightly feathered pets said to have developed a taste for cane juice. Imagine delicate little birds fluttering between stalks, sipping sweetness while men bent double in the heat, hacking and hauling. As for uncertainty, historians debate whether the meteoric rise of sugar colonies was truly planned or more accidental. Did England set out to create a Caribbean empire? Or did the crops simply outpace all others, forcing strategy to follow profit? Perhaps, like so much empire, it was improvisation hardened into permanence. You step into a boiling house now. The heat is suffocating, the air thick with steam. Copper cauldrons bubble with cane juice, slowly thickening into syrup, then crystallizing into sugar. Men stir with long paddles, their arms slick with sweat, their lungs stinging from fumes. The smell is cloying, sweet to the point of sickness. Outside, barrels are rolled to ships, each one heavy with white gold bound for England. In London, sugar transforms life. Once a luxury, it becomes common. Tea sweetened, puddings spiced, pastries glazed. Even medicine is mixed with it. Diets change, habits shift, demand soars. The empire becomes addicted, not to tobacco alone, but to sweetness. You walk along the docks of Port Royal in Jamaica, once called the wickedest city on earth. Taverns overflow with rum, distilled from molasses, and with sailors drunk on both drink and profit. Pirates swagger, merchants haggle, slaves shuffle in chains. The harbor is crowded with ships, their holds packed with barrels, their decks bristling with guns. The city feels alive, but also fragile. Its wealth balanced on sugar and the sea. Here's another quirky fact. When an earthquake struck Port Royal in 1692, parts of the city literally slid into the sea, swallowed whole. Survivors claimed they saw houses sinking while people inside still sat at tables. The wickedest city vanished in minutes, its decadence buried beneath waves. And the uncertainty. Was the earthquake seen as divine punishment or natural disaster? Some preachers thundered it was God's wrath for sin. Others saw it as simple misfortune. Either way, the symbolism was irresistible. An empire's excess humbled in an instant. But the sugar islands are not built on sweetness alone. The labor is relentless, brutal, unending. Ships cross the Atlantic in triangular routes. manufactured goods from England to Africa, enslaved Africans to the Caribbean, sugar and rum back to England. The trade enriches merchants, fattens treasuries, fuels expansion. But behind the wealth is suffering. Millions transported against their will, their lives bound to fields and mills. You hear the rhythm of the cane fields, the machetes swing, the carts creak, the overseer's shouts. Nights bring little rest, only the hum of insects and the faint sound of drums, music carried in memory from another continent. The empire's story here is wealth and sorrow intertwined. Here's a quirky image. In Barbados, some planters built mock castles on their estates, complete with battlements, as if pretending they were lords back in England. These tiny fortresses stood among fields of cane, half theater, half defense, their walls echoing with both laughter and paranoia and uncertainty. Did these colonies create more wealth for the empire than they cost in blood and conflict? Some argue sugar funded England's rise as a global power. Others suggest the costs: wars with Spain and France, constant rebellions, drained as much as they gave. The balance sheet of empire remains contested, figures blurred like ink in rain. At night, the Caribbean hums with a different life. You sit beneath palm trees, the air heavy with jasmine, the sea whispering against shore. Fireflies blink in the dark, drums beat softly in the distance. Above, stars shine bright, as if the whole sky leans closer. The empire may call this a possession, a jewel. But in the stillness, you feel its own rhythm, older than any flag or crown. The sugar flows, the ships sail, the coins clink in London. The islands remain, half paradise, half furnace, their sweetness bound to chains. You close your eyes, hearing the waves mingle with the rustle of cane, the laughter in taverns, the prayers whispered in fields. The Caribbean breathes, and with it, the empire grows. The air thickens with heat, heavy and still, carrying scents of cardamom, turmeric, and smoke. You step into a crowded bazaar in India, the late afternoon sun glinting on brass vessels and silk banners. The noise surrounds you, vendors calling, coins clinking, oxen lowing, children darting through the throng. The empire that began on cold northern docks now stands in the heart of a land older, larger, and richer than anything England has ever known. You walk past stalls where spices tower in piles like colored sands. Saffron glowing like fire, pepper black as coal, ginger pale and knotted. Jewels sparkle in the half-light, bangles of gold, pearls threaded into necklaces, rubies set in silver. Overhead, cloth awnings billow, casting shade in jewel tones. To your right, an elephant ambles past, painted in swirling patterns, bells jingling at its neck. The empire here is not just conquest. It is immersion in a world as dazzling as it is complex. At first, England's foothold is small. The East India Company has its factories, warehouses and trading posts, scattered along the coasts. Surat, Madras, Calcutta, Bombay. Mughal emperors, mighty and wealthy, permit these outposts in exchange for tribute and trade. For a time, the company bows humbly, merchants deferring to emperors who rule millions. But slowly, inch by inch, trade becomes influence, and influence hardens into control. Here's your historical fact. By the mid-18th century, after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, the East India Company effectively controlled Bengal, one of the richest provinces in the world. With it came not just profit, but taxation and governance. A private company ruling millions as though it were a nation. And the quirky detail? Robert Clive, the company officer who led at Plassey, reportedly brought back such immense wealth that he was nicknamed Clive of India. When questioned about corruption, he famously declared in Parliament that he was astonished by his own moderation in not taking even more. Imagine standing before lawmakers accused of excess and replying that your self-restraint was the real marvel. As for uncertainty, historians debate whether the company's victory at Plassey was genius or luck. The battle itself was small, more skirmish than war. But betrayal among local allies and bribes to Indian generals decided the outcome. Was it strategy, or simply fortune favoring greed? You wander deeper into India's markets and palaces. The Mughal court gleams with marble halls and jeweled thrones. Gardens stretch with fountains and flowers designed as earthly paradises. The English, pale in their wool coats, stand awkwardly amid silks and gems. Yet slowly their presence grows. They build forts, raise armies, hire sepoys, Indian soldiers trained in European style. Trade posts become strongholds, merchants become governors. Picture the streets of Calcutta in the 18th century. The Hooghly River, bustling with boats, warehouses stacked with cotton, opium, indigo. English officials stroll shaded avenues, their homes blending Georgian style with Indian courtyards. Around them, life continues. Fishermen hauling nets, weavers at looms, women drawing water from wells. The empire overlays, but does not erase. Here's another quirky fact. The company minted its own currency, coins stamped with Mughal emperors' names, even as their real power waned. Imagine paying taxes to a British-run company using coins that still bore the image of a Mughal ruler. A strange halfway world where symbols lag behind reality and uncertainty. Scholars debate whether Indians saw the company as legitimate rulers or merely temporary interlopers. Some elites collaborated, finding profit and power in alliance. Others resisted fiercely. For ordinary villagers, the distinction may have mattered less than the taxes collected, the crops demanded, the disruptions felt. You pause in a weaving quarter. Rows of looms clatter as men and women create cloth fine as mist. Muslin, famed for its softness, so delicate it could be drawn through a ring. These fabrics travel to London, where aristocrats wear them proudly. Yet the demand for British-made textiles eventually crushes local weavers, their livelihoods undone by the very empire that carried their work abroad. In villages, fields of indigo and opium spread, grown under company contract. Indigo stains hands blue. Opium seeps into economies, both traded overseas. Farmers groan under debt, their crops no longer their own. Empire changes not only rulers, but soil itself. At night, you sit in the shadow of a fort. The walls rise high, cannons jutting over parapets, flags fluttering in humid wind. Inside, officers dine by candlelight, sipping wine, speaking of trade and conquest. Outside, the city murmurs with voices in countless languages. A million lives turning beneath foreign eyes. Here's a quirky image. British officials in India sometimes held tiger shoots, hunting great cats for sport. They posed in stiff uniforms, rifles in hand, beside fallen animals striped gold and black. The tiger, a symbol of India's wild strength, became both trophy and metaphor for control and uncertainty. Was India truly conquered? Or did the British ride currents already shifting in Mughal decline? Some argue the empire filled a vacuum left by fading rulers. Others insist it forced its way through cunning, bribes, and guns. The truth may lie in both, a tide of change both seized and shaped. You close your eyes, listening to the night. The bazaar falls quiet, the elephants sleep. The river laps softly at its banks. The empire here is not just lines on maps. It is markets and palaces, villages and forts. Songs in languages foreign to English ears, stories older than England itself. The sun beats down on India, and with it, the empire of the sun never set stretches farther than ever before. yet you sense both power and fragility, grandeur and unease, as if the land itself waits, watching, knowing that no empire lasts forever. The air grows thicker still, humid and heavy with the scent of salt and wood smoke. You stand on a coastline where the sea crashes endlessly against rocky headlands, and the cries of gulls mingle with the rhythmic beat of drums from somewhere inland. The Atlantic has become a highway of empire, and here on the western shores of Africa, its traffic is unrelenting. The ships that once dreamed of spices and sugar now pause in harbors to barter for darker cargo. You walk along the ramparts of a coastal fort. Whitewashed walls rise against the sun, cannons jutting outward over turquoise seas. Inside the courtyard, barrels of gunpowder and crates of textiles sit in neat rows, ready for trade. English merchants bargain in the shade, their ledgers open, quills scratching. African rulers and middlemen negotiate fiercely, offering ivory tusks, gold dust, palm oil. But behind the shimmering goods lies another commodity, the most tragic of all. Here's your historical fact. By the 17th century, the English were deeply involved in the Atlantic slave trade, transporting millions of Africans across the ocean to labor in Caribbean plantations. Companies like the Royal African Company held charters granting monopoly over this trade, filling ships with human cargo. And the quirky detail? Among the goods exchanged for captives were brightly colored beads and brass bracelets. Archaeologists still find them buried at sites across Africa, remnants of bargains where trinkets became tokens of unimaginable consequence. Picture a chief running his fingers through a string of beads, weighing them against the lives of those he sold. As for uncertainty, historians debate how much local African leaders controlled versus how much Europeans coerced. Some evidence shows active African participation in trade networks. Others emphasize European violence and exploitation. The truth, tangled and painful, lies somewhere between, partnership and plunder entwined. You step into a dim chamber below the fort, and the air changes. It is cool, heavy, suffocating. Stone walls close around you, narrow windows let in only slivers of light. This is the dungeon, where captives wait before ships depart. Chains clink faintly, the stench of sweat and despair lingers. Outside, the surf beats steady, indifferent. You hear voices, low, muffled, countless languages blending into murmurs. Men, women, children, all waiting. Some whisper prayers, others sit silent, their faces turned inward. The merchants above count coins, write ledgers, sip wine. Two worlds, one on top of the other, divided by stone. When the ships load, the scene shifts again. Chains clatter, footsteps stumble, guards shout. The decks fill, space narrowed to inches. The ocean journey is long, cruel, relentless. You can almost feel the boards press against your back, the air hot and stale, the sea pitching endlessly. For weeks, months, this is life. Darkness, hunger, fear. Back in England, the story is told differently. You wander through London's streets, and you see sugar in teacups, molasses dripping in bakeries, tobacco smoked in clay pipes. The goods flow freely, their origins blurred. Few pause to think of the voyage across the ocean, of the human cost. The empire's wealth grows, its ships multiply, its merchants thrive. Here's another quirky fact. The triangle trade became so systematized that some English ships left ports carrying little more than cheap cloth, glass beads, and rum, knowing these items could purchase lives on Africa's coast. The predictability of horror, packaged neatly as commerce, and uncertainty. Scholars still debate the scale of English involvement compared to other European powers. Portugal, Spain, France all shared the trade. But by the 18th century, Britain had become the dominant force. Was it efficiency, naval power, or ruthless calculation that secured this role? The answer remains debated, though the impact is beyond question. Not all encounters on African shores are shadowed, however. You stroll through markets and coastal towns, piles of kola nuts, baskets of yams, fabrics dyed deep indigo, brass cast into intricate figures. Kingdoms like Benin, Ashanti, and Dahomey thrive in trade networks long before Europeans arrive. Ivory carvings gleam, bronze plaques depict kings in regal detail, art that will one day fill museums far away. The English marvel at these cultures, sometimes respecting, sometimes dismissing, often misunderstanding. They sketch what they see, sending back drawings of elephants, palm trees, and bustling markets. To readers in London, Africa becomes both exotic and imagined, a place of marvels and mysteries. Here's a quirky image. Some English sailors brought home African parrots, their feathers bright green and red, their voices mimicking English phrases in clipped, uncanny tones. Imagine a parrot in a London parlor croaking fair winds, while its mistress sips tea sweetened with sugar cut by enslaved hands. And uncertainty. How much did ordinary Englishmen truly know of the slave trade? Some suggest knowledge was widespread, even if uncomfortable. Others argue it was cloaked, softened, hidden behind the pleasant veil of consumer goods. Silence can be as powerful as speech in shaping history. By the late 8th century, change stirs. Abolitionists speak out. Pamphlets circulate. Testimonies of horror reach Parliament. You hear their voices, quiet at first, then louder. They describe shackles, beatings, starvation. They tell of men leaping into the sea rather than endure. The empire begins to reckon, uneasily, with the shadows that fund its sweetness. But that is still ahead. For now, on this shore, the forts stand, the ships sail, the ledgers fill. Africa becomes both partner and victim, its people and goods woven into the empire's fabric. The sun beats down, unyielding, indifferent to both bargains and cries. Night comes to the coast. You sit on the ramparts of the fort, watching the sea glow faintly in moonlight. The waves lap steady, as they always have. The drums inland beat softly, distant, unbroken. You feel the weight of what has passed here, the deals struck, the lives lost, the goods exchanged. The empire of the sun never sets. But here its light falls harsh, casting long shadows across the sand. You close your eyes, hearing both the surf and the faint echo of chains. Two rhythms intertwined, impossible to untangle. The air is cooler now, sharper, carrying the scent of pine forests and wood smoke. You stand on the edge of a clearing in North America, the trees crowding close, their trunks thick and straight, their branches reaching toward a wide sky. This is no tropical island, no spice-laden market. This is a continent vast and untamed, its rivers wide as seas, its winters cruel, its summers fertile. Here, empires collide. You walk through a settlement of rough wooden houses, their chimneys puffing smoke against the pale dawn. Chickens scratch in the dirt, children run with wooden toys, and men haul logs to strengthen the palisade that circles the town. These are English colonists, carving homes from wilderness, their lives fragile yet determined. Each field cleared, each church built, each barrel of tobacco shipped back across the Atlantic tightens England's hold on this land. But they are not alone. To the north, French settlements cluster along the St. Lawrence, their canoes gliding through forests, their fur traders striking deep inland. To the south and west, Spanish forts stand, their banners fluttering in the sun. And everywhere, long before Europeans arrived, are nations of native peoples, the Haudenosaunee, the Powhatan, the Cherokee, and countless more, whose lands these truly are. The stage is set for conflict, alliances, betrayals, and wars that will decide whose empire rises. Here's your historical fact. In the mid-18th century, the 7 Years' War, called the French and Indian War in North America, pitted Britain against France for control of the continent. The war ended in 1763, with Britain gaining Canada and vast lands east of the Mississippi. It was a victory that transformed the empire. And the quirky detail? During that war, a young officer named George Washington, yes, the same man who would later lead a revolution against Britain, served under the British Crown. His first command, a skirmish at Fort Necessity, was a bungled affair that helped ignite the wider conflict. Imagine the irony. The Empire's future nemesis cutting his teeth as a loyal British soldier. As for uncertainty, historians still argue how much Britain's victory truly secured its empire or sowed the seeds of downfall. The war was expensive, and taxes imposed afterward to pay for it sparked resentment in the colonies. Triumph and trouble came hand in hand. You walk deeper into a frontier forest. The trees close around you, the air damp with moss, the ground uneven with roots. Fur traders move silently, carrying muskets and packs heavy with pelts. Beaver, prized for hats in Europe, fuels an economy here, rivers becoming highways of trade. Native nations hold power in these exchanges, their knowledge of land and waterways indispensable. Some ally with the French, some with the English, all balancing survival against shifting promises. The empire here is not just war and conquest, it is barter, treaty, and uneasy coexistence. You hear drums in the distance, you see smoke rising from a native village, you smell maize roasting on fires. The English, awkward in their stiff coats, try to parley with wampum belts, their words often misunderstood, their promises seldom kept. You wander into a colonial town now. Streets of timber houses line muddy lanes, a church bell rings, a market bustles. Merchants sell fish, candles, cloth, tobacco. Taverns fill with talk of taxes, rumors of war, tales of Indian raids. The colony feels both English and not. Its people shaped by distance, by forests, by winters harsher than any in England. They still drink tea, still wear wigs, still sing hymns, yet their lives diverge. Rooted now in a new soil. Here's another quirky fact. In some colonial towns, residents played a game called ninepins, a precursor to bowling, using wooden pins set in a dirt alley. It was so popular that later laws tried to restrict it, fearing too much idle play. Imagine colonists pausing in their frontier struggles to knock down pins, laughter echoing across rough streets, and uncertainty. Did these settlers see themselves as English or as something new? Letters suggest both. Some longed for home, others felt distinct, proud of their resilience. Identity blurred across oceans, shifting with each generation. The wars continue. You stand on a battlefield, muskets firing, smoke drifting through trees. Red-coated soldiers march in formation, their drums beating steady, while native allies dart through forests, their war cries sharp. Cannon roar, horses scream, men shout orders lost in chaos. The clash is fierce, but slow, brutal, more about endurance than glory. At night, the battlefield falls silent. The wounded groan, the dead lie still, the campfires flicker. Soldiers sip rum, write letters home, men torn uniforms. Even here, ordinary life persists. Meals cooked, boots cleaned, jokes told. Empire is not only built in battles, but in the quiet persistence of men enduring. Here's one more quirky image. Benjamin Franklin, long before independence, suggested that the colonies unite under a plan of defense. His emblem was a snake cut into pieces, labeled with colony names, captioned "Join or Die." At the time, The idea failed. The colonies too divided. But the image endured, a strange foreshadowing of unity against the very empire it was meant to defend. And uncertainty? Did Britain ever truly understand its colonies? Some argue the empire saw them only as markets and resources. Others claim genuine attempts at governance and protection. The truth lies muddled, a relationship both affectionate and strained. Like kin who never fully trust each other. The war ends. Britain triumphant, France diminished, Spain shifting. The map of North America changes, red shading spreading wide. London celebrates, bells ringing, cannons firing salutes. Colonists too rejoice, yet already tensions stir. Taxes, laws, restrictions. The very victory that seemed to secure empire becomes the spark of rebellion. You stand in a colonial tavern, the air thick with pipe smoke and argument. Men slam fists on tables, voices rising against distant authority. Outside, snow falls quietly, muffling streets, but inside, fire burns hot. Empire here is not only expansion, it is fracture. Night falls on the frontier. You sit by a river, its surface glinting under the moon. The forest hums with unseen life, owls calling, insects buzzing. The air is sharp, the fire beside you warm. Across the water, the land stretches endless, its future contested, its people restless. The empire has won, but it has also lost, though it does not yet know it. North America is both jewel and thorn, triumph and trouble. You close your eyes, hearing the river's steady flow, carrying whispers of battles fought, treaties signed, rebellions brewing. The empire stretches farther, yet grows fragile too, pulled taut across oceans and forests. The sea opens again, vast and endless, rolling southward toward horizons most Europeans have never seen. You stand on the deck of a creaking ship, the air salt-stung, the sun blazing overhead. Months of sailing stretch behind you, past Africa, past Asia, past the Pacific's wild expanse, and now at last, land emerges. A coastline long, strange, and new to European eyes. This is Australia, though in the 18th century it is often called New Holland or later New South Wales. To the empire, it is both mystery and opportunity. A blank space on maps soon filled with red lines and words. The land sprawls vast and ancient. You step onto its shore, the sand pale beneath your boots, the eucalyptus scent drifting on the wind. Strange creatures startle you. Kangaroos bounding on powerful legs, cockatoos screeching in trees, platypuses slipping into rivers with beak and fur combined. It feels like another world, as though creation here followed rules entirely different. Yet for the empire, difference is not deterrence. It is invitation. The first foothold comes in 1788. The first fleet, a convoy of ships carrying convicts, soldiers, and supplies, anchors in Botany Bay. Out step men and women in chains, their crimes ranging from theft to forgery, their punishment exile to the ends of the earth. Soldiers build barracks, officers mark plots. The Union Jack rises over alien soil. Sydney is born, a settlement carved by necessity, its foundation neither gold nor sugar, but prisoners and guards. Here's your historical fact. More than 160,000 convicts were transported to Australia between 1788 and 1868, forming the backbone of early colonial society. Their labor cleared land, built roads, raised crops, and a quirky detail? Among those convicts were not only thieves, but also petty offenders like a boy transported for stealing a handkerchief, and a woman exiled for pilfering a loaf of bread. Imagine being banished halfway across the world for the price of a snack. As for uncertainty, Historians still debate whether transportation was primarily punishment or population strategy. Was it meant to rid Britain of unwanted criminals, or to cede a colony cheaply? Perhaps both. Justice and empire intertwining. You walk through the early settlement. The huts are crude, the soil unyielding, crops failing in strange seasons. The colonists, accustomed to European rhythms, struggle against Australia's climate. Food grows scarce, discipline harsh. Rum becomes currency, traded as freely as coin. Yet slowly, painfully, the colony takes root. Sheep graze in pastures, their wool destined to clothe Europe. Fields expand, houses rise, streets take shape. From exile grows permanence, but the land is not empty. Long before the Union Jack, Australia is home to Aboriginal peoples whose cultures stretch back tens of thousands of years, older than pyramids or palaces. Their songs map the land. Their stories weave sky and earth. They see the newcomers as intruders, and conflict follows. The empire records little of their voices, but the land remembers. You travel inland with explorers, men like Burke and Wills, who push across deserts with camels and supplies, driven by curiosity and ambition. Rivers dry, food dwindles, maps fail. Some survive, some vanish. The land proves vast, harsh, unconquerable in spirit. Yet railways come, telegraphs hum, towns spread, sheep multiply by millions. Australia becomes wool's kingdom, feeding Britain's looms, its fields turned into empire's pasture. Here's another quirky fact. In the 19th century, some Australians kept pet kangaroos on leashes, leading them through towns like dogs. Imagine an English officer strolling down a Sydney street with a bounding marsupial at his side, half pet, half symbol of a strange new world. And uncertainty? Scholars debate how much Britain initially valued Australia. Some records suggest it was seen merely as a prison outpost, a dumping ground for convicts. Others emphasize its strategic role in the Pacific and its vast resources. Only later, when wool and gold surged, did its importance crystallize. You pause in a gold field. The year is the 1850s, and men swarm rivers and hills, pans swirling with water and grit, eyes bright with dreams. Gold nuggets gleam in muddy hands, fortunes won and lost overnight. Migrants pour in from Britain, China, America. Camps spring up, tents flapping in wind, fires smoking. The colony pulses with energy, its identity shifting from penal colony to frontier of fortune. At night, the diggers gather around fires, singing, arguing, laughing. Some dream of returning to England rich. Others choose to stay, roots sinking deeper. The empire stretches here too. Red lines thickening, railways built, ports bustling. Here's a quirky image. In 1838, Australia held its first horse race, an event so popular that even convicts wagered rum on the outcomes. From harsh exile to sporting festivity, the colony quickly adopted rituals of leisure as well as labor and uncertainty. Did the British settlers see themselves as Australians yet, or still as transplanted Britons? Letters show both sentiments, longing for home and pride in new beginnings. The identity grows in layers, part empire, part frontier, part invention. You stand on a cliff at dusk, overlooking the ocean. The waves crash far below, gulls wheel in the fading light. Behind you stretch fields of sheep, gold towns, convict-built roads, Aboriginal land scarred and transformed. Ahead lies the Pacific, vast and mysterious. Australia is both an end and a beginning. An exile turned colony, a prison turned nation in waiting. The empire of the sun never sets has reached its southern horizon. The stars appear strange above you, constellations unfamiliar, yet still the same sky, under which sails unfurl and stories unfold. You close your eyes, hearing the surf's steady thunder, the faint echo of chains, the bleating of sheep, the laughter of gold seekers. Australia breathes its paradox. Punishment and promise, wilderness and wealth, silence and song. The map lies flat before you, its parchment creased, its colors faded by candlelight. At first, it looks ordinary. Lines, names, coastlines traced with care. But then you see them. Streaks of red, spreading across oceans and continents, curling around coasts, cutting through interiors. These are the arteries of empire. The veins that bind together lands so distant that only the sea and sky could possibly connect them. They call it the empire on which the sun never sets. And here on this map, you begin to see why. You run your finger across the Atlantic. A red line snakes from London to the Caribbean, carrying sugar, rum, tobacco. It turns south, hugging Africa's coast, dotted with forts and trading posts. Then sweeps around the Cape of Good Hope, eastward across the Indian Ocean to Bombay, Madras, Calcutta. From there it continues, thinner but insistent, through Malaya, Singapore, Hong Kong, all the way to Sydney. The globe shrinks under your touch, distances bridged by sails, later by steam. The map is more than geography. It is ambition inked into paper. You walk into a telegraph office in the 19th century, and the air hums with energy. Operators sit with wires and clicking keys, tapping messages that race across continents. The invention of the telegraph has shrunk the empire even more. Once, news from India took months to reach London by ship. Now, with submarine cables laid beneath oceans, it arrives in hours. Here's your historical fact. The first transatlantic telegraph cable was successfully laid in 1866, linking Europe and North America. Soon after, Britain wove a network of cables nicknamed the All-Red Line, a global communication system that bound colonies to the metropole. And the quirky detail? Operators along these cables often joked that the wires hummed with empire, as though the very sound of the clicking keys carried the heartbeat of the world. Imagine standing in a dim office on a Pacific island, sending dots and dashes that ripple all the way to London in seconds. As for uncertainty, historians debate how much the telegraph truly unified the empire. Some say it gave Britain unprecedented control, a nerve system stretching across the globe. Others argue it exposed just how unmanageable distant colonies could be, as speed of communication did not guarantee obedience. Instant knowledge is not the same as instant power. You trace another red line, this time by rail. Steam locomotives chug across India, their whistles piercing hot air, their tracks cutting through fields and hills. The railways spread like veins, binding together vast regions. Soldiers move faster, goods flow cheaper, officials travel further. The empire celebrates the rail as progress, modernity, civilization. But it is also a tool of extraction. Cotton, grain, indigo, all pulled swiftly to ports for export. Picture yourself standing at a station in Calcutta in the 1860s. The platform bustles. Merchants hauling sacks, sepoys boarding trains, women in saris waiting with baskets of fruit. The engine roars, steam hisses, sparks fly. A child stares wide-eyed, clutching her mother's hand. The rail is both wonder and disruption, tying lives to empire's clock. Here's another quirky fact. In Australia, the states laid railroads with different track gauges, some wide, some narrow, so that trains could not cross borders without stopping to switch. Imagine a railway meant to unite an empire that instead fractured itself with mismatched rails. Passengers hauling baggage from one train to another under the hot sun. And uncertainty? Did railways modernize colonies for local benefit or primarily serve Britain's exploitation? Some argue they seeded industry and growth. Others point to famine, when grain sped to ports for export while villages starved. The steel lines carry both pride and pain. Now you step aboard a steamship. The sails are gone, replaced by iron hulls and smoking stacks. The sea still stretches vast, but time shrinks. Where voyages once took months, now they take weeks. Troops rush to distant wars, migrants cross oceans, governors hurry home. Steam changes everything, and with the Suez Canal opening in 1869, the world becomes smaller still. The shortcut slices weeks off the journey to India, binding east and west tighter than ever. Imagine standing on the deck as the ship passes through the canal's flat, sandy expanse. No waves, no open ocean, just a man-made artery carved into desert. The empire congratulates itself. Geography itself conquered. The red lines multiply not only on maps, but in minds. Atlases printed in London glow with British red. Children tracing it with fingers, proud of belonging to something so vast. In classrooms, globes stand with great swathes of color. The empire painted bright as though the world itself has donned a uniform. Here's a quirky image. British publishers sometimes printed empire maps, with clocks showing the time in each colony. At a glance, children could know the hour in Canada, India, Australia. Imagine a classroom where a boy in Manchester looks up at a map and says, "It is noon in Bombay, tea time in Sydney." The empire felt in minutes, and uncertainty. Did these maps truly reflect unity, or were they illusions of control? Critics argue they gave a false sense of permanence, red paint masking the fragility beneath. Maps are symbols as much as reality. You walk into a port city, Singapore, Hong Kong, Cape Town, and you see the lines in action. Steamships unloading goods, telegraph wires buzzing overhead, railway tracks leading inland. Merchants haggle, soldiers march, dock workers shout. The empire is alive not as abstract, but as network. Ports, wires, rails, steam. Every line hums with exchange. At night, you stand by the harbor, lamps glowing, water lapping against piers. A telegraph office glows faintly on shore, its key tapping like a heartbeat. A train whistle echoes in the distance, carrying goods inland. A ship's horn sounds low, heading out into the dark. The empire's veins pulse even as the world sleeps. Here's one last quirky fact. Submarine cables were so vital that in wartime, Britain guarded them fiercely. During the First World War, British ships cut Germany's cables at sea, severing their communication. The empire's lines became weapons as well as wires. And uncertainty? Did these networks strengthen loyalty or merely reveal cracks faster? Reports of rebellion, famine, protest traveled instantly, but response still lagged. The empire could know quickly, but not always act effectively. Information outran power. You close your eyes, and you picture the map again. The red lines shimmer in the candlelight, binding continents like threads in a vast tapestry. But you notice too how thin some are, how fragile. A storm, a rebellion, a war, any could snap them. The map is both majesty and mirage, its veins pulsing with trade, conquest, and connection. The empire on which the sun never sets is not only geography. It is infrastructure, technology, imagination. It is the hum of telegraph wires, the hiss of steam, the rattle of rails, the ink on children's maps. You breathe deeply, hearing it all. The click of keys, the whistle of trains, the thrum of engines. And then silence. As the lines stretch on into night, the morning begins quietly in a distant colony. The sun rises over tiled roofs and palm fronds, over market stalls stacked with fruit, over barracks where soldiers roll from their bunks, yawning. In the soft light, You wander down a street that could be anywhere and nowhere. An English-style courthouse with white columns, a church with a bell that tolls the hour, and beyond them, houses built of local wood, their shutters wide, children's laughter spilling into the air. Life in the colonies is not one life, but many, braided together into something complex and uneven. You see the rhythms of markets, the drills of soldiers, the lessons of schools, the clamor of ports. Each colony beats with its own pulse, yet each one hums faintly with London's distant voice. You begin in a marketplace. The smells hit first. Mangoes, roasted fish, fresh bread, spices sharp in the air. Traders call out prices, buyers haggle, coins clink. A woman in sari and bangles sells rice to a British soldier, his red coat dusty in the heat. A Chinese merchant sells tea leaves to an English clerk scribbling in a ledger. The languages swirl around you: Hindi, Swahili, Cantonese, English, all layered like music. Here's your historical fact. In colonies across Africa and Asia, English often became the language of administration and trade. Yet daily life pulsed with dozens, even hundreds, of local tongues. In India alone, the Raj governed a land with more than 200 languages spoken. And the quirky detail? British colonials sometimes brought cricket bats with them wherever they went. So much so that impromptu cricket matches were played in places as unlikely as dusty fields in Kenya or crowded lanes in Calcutta. Imagine children and clerks pausing trade to chase a leather ball while goats wander curiously across the pitch. As for uncertainty, historians still ask whether these small exchanges, tea bought in a market, games played between neighbors, were signs of real cultural mingling or just surface moments masking deeper divides. Did empire weave connections or only overlay them lightly? You step next into a colonial schoolhouse. The walls are bare, the floor packed dirt, the air hot. At the front, a British teacher reads aloud from a textbook, drilling pupils in English spelling and history. "The empire," he intones, "is your empire." The children repeat, their accents awkward, their eyes both curious and weary. Outside, they will go home to houses where their parents speak local tongues, cook local food, tell stories older than empire itself. Here's another quirky fact. Some textbooks used in colonial schools carried maps showing the empire painted red, with slogans like, "This is the land where the sun never sets." Children learn geography as loyalty, empire as identity. Many remembered those maps long into adulthood, the red ink seared into memory. And uncertainty? Did these schools truly educate or indoctrinate? Some alumni later became critics of empire, armed with literacy and rhetoric they learned in those very classrooms. Others absorbed loyalty to Britain, only to question it later. The classroom was as much battlefield as any fort. You turn down another street and come upon barracks. Soldiers drill in the yard, boots pounding in rhythm, muskets gleaming. Some are British, their uniforms pressed despite the heat. Others are locals, sepoys in India, askaris in Africa, trained in European style, their loyalties tested by pay and command. The empire's armies are patchwork, built from men of many lands. Here's a quirky image. In the sweltering sun of India, some regiments insisted on wearing stiff woolen uniforms imported from England. Soldiers fainted, cursed, and sometimes rebelled against the absurdity of wool in 40-degree heat. Yet the symbolism mattered. Uniforms binding men to empire more than climate ever could. And uncertainty? Were these colonial armies loyal because of allegiance or necessity? Records show both devotion and mutiny. The Sepoy Uprising of 1857, for instance, revealed just how fragile that loyalty could be. Trust was always balanced on a knife edge. You find yourself in a colonial governor's house, the ceiling high, the rooms shaded. Maps hang on the walls, papers clutter the desk. The governor sits in a wicker chair, fanning himself, dictating letters to London. Outside, clerks scribble. Messengers hurry. Guards stand at attention. The rhythm of empire is paperwork as much as musket fire, letters, reports, censuses, all marching steadily back to the metropole. Yet beyond the walls, life follows different rhythms. Farmers sow and reap. Fishermen cast nets. Artisans carve wood. Women draw water. Empire lays its framework, but local life flows around and beneath it, enduring quietly. Here's another quirky fact. In some colonies, postal systems were so efficient that letters from London could reach Bombay in under 2 weeks by the late 19th century, thanks to steamships and the Suez Canal. Yet, in rural districts of the same colony, news from a nearby town might take days to travel by foot or bullock cart. The empire's speed was uneven, like lightning flashing along some lines while others stayed in darkness. And uncertainty. Did colonials truly feel connected to London through these systems? Or did distance remain insurmountable? Diaries suggest both. A sense of belonging to something vast, and yet a sense of being forgotten at its edges. The empire was both intimate and remote. At night, the colony shifts. Lamps flicker in markets, taverns buzz with laughter, drums beat in villages beyond. A British officer sips gin on a veranda, listening to cicadas sing. A clerk reads a newspaper shipped weeks late, its pages already old news. A child curls beneath a mosquito net, dreaming in a language the empire will never learn. Life in the colonies is mosaic, uneven, layered. It is laughter in taverns and weeping in dungeons, cricket in fields and hunger in villages, textbooks teaching empire and mothers telling older tales by firelight. It is both ordinary and extraordinary, daily and global, rooted and uprooted. You close your eyes, hearing it all: the school teacher's voice, the soldier's drum, the market's din, the governor's pen scratching late at night. The empire breathes through its colonies, not in banners or battles, but in these daily lives, countless and fragile. The sun never sets on empire, but it rises and falls on these mornings and nights, on families waking and sleeping, on markets opening and closing, on children growing beneath flags they did not choose. The sun presses down with a weight that feels almost physical, a blaze of gold and heat over Delhi's domes and minarets. You stand in the heart of India during the British Raj, the crown jewel of the empire, the place where the sun seems to blaze brightest. The air is thick with dust and incense, with the clamor of carts and the cries of hawkers. Elephants lumber through crowded streets, their hides painted with red and yellow patterns. Rickshaws jostle for space with carriages driven by uniformed coachmen. Above it all rises the Union Jack, fluttering faintly in the furnace air. The Raj is not subtle. It declares itself in railway stations larger than palaces, in government buildings modeled on classical Rome, in parades where British officers ride in gleaming helmets, their horses snorting under the heat. Yet beneath the pomp is paradox. Railways that carry grain while villages starve, schools that teach English poetry while local weavers lose their livelihoods, laws that proclaim order while rebellions simmer. You step into a railway station and the air hums with activity. Vendors sell chai, their voices carrying above the hiss of steam. Coolies rush with trunks, sepoys stand guard, passengers cluster on benches. The train arrives with a shriek and a roar, its black engine spitting sparks. Men in suits step down beside farmers in turbans. Women in saris walk past English memsahibs carrying parasols. The station is a crossroads of empire, where iron and steam collapse distances. Here's your historical fact. By 1900, India had the fourth largest railway network in the world, much of it built under British rule. It bound the subcontinent together as never before, changing commerce, culture, and even time itself. And the quirky detail? Railway timetables forced the creation of Indian Standard Time, a unifying clock across regions that once kept their own hours. Villages where the sun and stars once set the rhythm now ran on whistles and watches. Imagine elders muttering at trains that made their cows milked too early or their meals eaten too late. As for uncertainty, historians still debate whether the railways primarily benefited Indians or Britain. Some argue they modernized the land. Others insist they served mainly to export resources and move troops. The steel rails carry both pride and grievance, progress and exploitation. You walk into a grand hall in Calcutta, chandeliers blazing, music playing, officers in crisp uniforms waltzing with women in gowns. This is the empire at leisure. Dances, polo matches, garden parties. Outside, the air is thick with heat and poverty. But inside, fans whirl lazily as the band plays. Here's another quirky fact. British colonials sometimes imported ice from America in giant blocks, shipped halfway across the world to chill their drinks in India's searing summers. Imagine the extravagance. Ice melting in crystal glasses while outside, men fainted from heat and uncertainty. Were these displays of luxury signs of dominance or insecurity? Some say the grandeur was meant to project unshakable authority. Others suggest it betrayed a constant anxiety, that without spectacle, their rule would feel fragile. You step outside again into the streets of Bombay. The markets are alive with color. Women in saris bright as jewels, stalls piled with spices, fish drying in the sun, carts laden with cotton. Children dart through alleys, shouting, laughing. The smells overwhelm. Chili, smoke, sweat, salt, flowers. This is the everyday life that endures beneath flags and parades. You pass a school where children recite Shakespeare, their voices halting but eager. A boy dreams of London he will never see. A girl scribbles poems in 2 languages at once. Education is a weapon with 2 edges. It spreads literacy, but also seeds questioning. Some of the empire's fiercest critics will emerge from classrooms it built. Here's another quirky image. In Simla, the summer capital of the Raj, officials escaped the heat by moving entire offices into the Himalayan foothills. Files, desks, even clerks made the seasonal migration, the empire itself climbing into cooler air like a restless beast. Imagine a government carried uphill by mule and cart, determined to keep paperwork flowing even in the mountains, and uncertainty. Did the Raj unify India or deepen divisions? Some argue it stitched together a vast land through rail, law, and language. Others say it sharpened divides. Hindu against Muslim, caste against caste. Lines later hardened into nations. The Raj's legacy remains a tapestry of pride and pain. You wander into a famine-stricken district. The fields lie barren, the rivers shrunken, the air dry as bone. Villagers gather in silence, their bodies gaunt, their eyes hollow. Grain still moves, but not to them. Railways carry it to ports, bound for markets abroad. Officials debate numbers in ledgers, but in the fields, hunger speaks louder. The empire proclaims progress, but here progress is absent, lost to indifference. Here's your historical fact. Between the 1870s and early 20th century, millions died in famines under British rule, despite the existence of railways that could have carried relief. Policies of free market export often outweighed humanitarian aid. And the quirky detail? During one famine, officials in London continued to boast of India as the brightest jewel in the crown, even as fields lay littered with corpses. Words and reality split, the empire shining in speeches while dim in truth and uncertainty. Could more lives have been saved if policies changed? Or were the disasters inevitable under monsoons and droughts? Historians argue still. Numbers blur in memory, but the sorrow remains. At night, you sit in a quiet courtyard. The air cools, stars shimmer above minarets and rooftops. A sitar plays softly, its notes weaving through the air. A British officer writes a letter home, sweat staining the paper. A clerk lights a lantern, still copying records. A child drifts to sleep, her lullaby in a language untouched by empire. Life continues, vast and layered, beneath the Raj's weight. The paradox is always here. Railways and famines, Shakespeare and silence, ice in glasses and hunger in fields. India is both the brightest jewel and the heaviest burden. Empire's pride and its unhealed wound. You close your eyes, hearing it all. The hiss of trains, the laughter at dances, the quiet weeping in famine fields, the scratch of pens in offices, the strains of sitar in night air. The Raj breathes, vast and contradictory. Its echoes deep as the Ganges. Its light and shadow inseparable. The air is fragrant tonight, though not with spices or flowers. It is the bittersweet scent of tea leaves, dried and curled, packed into chests that wait in warehouses along the docks. You stand in Canton in the 18th century, the narrow lanes alive with color and sound. Lanterns sway in the breeze, silk banners flutter overhead, and the crowded stalls spill with porcelain, silk, and tea. For Britain, this port is not just another stop along the empire's endless routes. It is a lifeline, for tea has become more than a luxury. It is a ritual, a comfort, a national obsession. You wander through a London parlor decades later, and you see it clearly. The fire crackles, the kettle whistles, cups of delicate porcelain gleam on the table. A hostess pours amber liquid into saucers. Guests add sugar and milk. Conversation flows. By the 18th century, tea drinking is part of daily British life, an empire-wide addiction. Ships crowd harbors to supply it. Fortunes rise and fall upon its trade. Here's your historical fact. By the early 19th century, Britain imported tens of millions of pounds of tea annually from China, making it one of the most valuable commodities in global trade. And the quirky detail. Some households even built special tea caddies with locks, fearing servants might pilfer the precious leaves. Imagine protecting your tea as though it were treasure, locking it away at night like gold. As for uncertainty, historians still argue whether tea transformed British culture or merely reflected broader changes. Did it make afternoons social? Did it fuel industrial workers needing caffeine? Or was it simply a symbol of wealth turned commonplace? The answers mingle, like milk swirling in hot tea. But tea is only half the story. The other half lies in the ships sailing back to Canton, their holds filled not with silver, as once was required, but with something far more dangerous. Opium. You step into a warehouse in Calcutta, and the air is pungent with poppies. Workers roll balls of opium, press them into cakes, pack them into chests. The East India Company, having secured its foothold in India, now controls vast fields of poppies, their sap turned into trade goods. These are shipped to China, where restrictions forbid foreign merchants from freely trading. Yet opium slips through, addictive, destructive, irresistible. Here's your historical fact. By the 1830s, opium sales to China funded Britain's tea addiction, creating a cycle of dependency, China's tea for Britain's opium. And the quirky detail? Some smugglers used hollowed-out walking sticks or barrels labeled salt fish to hide opium, slipping it past officials with cunning. Imagine an inspector lifting a barrel lid, only to find fish staring up, the real cargo concealed beneath. As for uncertainty, Scholars debate how much the British government itself pushed the opium trade versus simply tolerating it. Officially, it was the East India Company and private traders. Unofficially, the empire's ships and diplomats shielded them. Responsibility blurs, as it often does in empire's shadows. You walk along Canton's riverfront, and the scene shifts. Chinese officials crack down, seizing opium, destroying stores. One man, Commissioner Lin Zexu, famously orders thousands of chests dumped into the sea in 1839, determined to stop the poison flooding his land. The water runs dark with dissolved opium, the gesture bold, uncompromising. The British response is swift. Warships arrive, cannons thunder, treaties follow. The Opium Wars crack China open, forcing ports to accept foreign merchants, handing over Hong Kong as a British possession in 1842. Here's a quirky fact. The Treaty of Nanking not only gave Britain Hong Kong, but also required China to pay millions in silver and open 5 treaty ports. Yet one British negotiator reportedly apologized privately, calling the terms unequal and harsh. Public victory, private doubt, and uncertainty? Did Britain truly see itself as bringing free trade to China? Or was that rhetoric masking profit? Official reports speak of principle. Private letters confess greed. The line between justification and truth is hard to see. Now you step into Hong Kong. At first, it is a rocky island with fishing villages, its hills steep, its harbors deep. But under British rule, it grows into a bustling port, a hub of trade and migration. Ships from every nation crowd its waters. Markets buzz with goods from every corner of the world. For Britain, Hong Kong becomes both symbol and prize. A foothold in the East, a jewel carved not from conquest of land, but from conquest of commerce. Picture yourself standing on Victoria Peak, looking down at the harbor. Junks sail beside steamships. Sampans weave between clippers. The city is a mosaic of cultures, yet British law and administration shape its streets. A new empire is rising, one of ports and contracts as much as armies. Here's another quirky image. In the mid-19th century, British merchants in Hong Kong built tea houses decorated with European chandeliers and Chinese scrolls, blending styles awkwardly but proudly. Guests sipped tea while debating trade. The decor itself a metaphor for empire's strange fusions and uncertainty. Was Hong Kong truly British, or always Chinese at its core? Even as governors ruled and flags flew, Chinese residents remained the majority, their culture and language shaping daily life. Empire on the ground rarely matched empire on paper. Meanwhile, tea continues to transform Britain. You sit in a worker's cottage in Manchester, where the table is bare but for bread and a teapot. Steam curls in the dim room. Children sip weak tea before trudging to mills. Tea, once aristocratic, now fuels the working class. It softens hunger, sharpens energy, warms cold mornings. Empire's goods become ordinary, woven into daily life far from the docks and wars that secured them. Here's another quirky fact. Tea was sometimes called the cup that cheers but does not inebriate, praised as a safe, sober alternative to gin. In reality, tea's caffeine buzz carried its own addictive pull. Imagine reformers smiling proudly at workers drinking tea, never realizing they were trading one dependency for another. And uncertainty? Did the empire build itself on addiction, sugar, tobacco, tea, opium, or on genuine innovation and industry? Perhaps both. The line between luxury and necessity, between profit and poison, is blurred like ink in water. Night falls in Canton. Lanterns glow, the river ripples with reflected light. Junks drift silently past. In London, the lamps of drawing rooms flicker as tea is poured. In Hong Kong, ships unload under the moon. The triangle of trade spins on, linking fields of poppies, chests of tea, and cups lifted in parlor rooms. You close your eyes, hearing the rustle of tea leaves, the whisper of opium smoke, the creak of ships at anchor. The empire stretches across oceans, not only by steel and gunpowder, but by craving for taste, for profit, for control. The air is drier here. Sun baking the earth into dust, the horizon shimmering with heat. You stand on the edge of an African plain in the late 19th century, and the silence is deceptive. Beneath the wide sky, an entire continent is being carved and claimed, its rivers mapped, its mountains sketched, its borders drawn by hands far away in Europe. This is the scramble for Africa, when Britain and other powers raced to divide lands that had thrived with kingdoms, trade, and cultures long before their arrival. You see explorers first, their journals filled with sketches of rivers and forests. Men like David Livingstone, who wandered for years, mapping the Zambezi, describing Victoria Falls as the smoke that thunders. His tales stirred imaginations in London, where parlors whispered of lost lakes and hidden kingdoms. Hot on his trail came traders and missionaries, then soldiers and administrators. The scramble began not with armies, but with stories, words that turned rivers into lines of ambition. Here's your historical fact. In 1884 to 85, European powers gathered at the Berlin Conference, hosted by Chancellor Bismarck, to decide how Africa would be partitioned. No African representatives were present. Borders were drawn with rulers and pens, indifferent to people and places, splitting tribes and joining rivals in ways that still shape the continent today. And the quirky detail? At the conference, delegates sometimes used colored pencils on large wall maps, shading regions like children filling in a puzzle, while diplomats sipped wine. Imagine the casualness. Pencils scratching while lives and futures were divided like squares on paper. As for uncertainty, historians debate whether Britain entered the scramble reluctantly, pushed by rivals, or eagerly chasing empire. Some records suggest caution, others ambition. Perhaps, as so often, it was both. Hesitation yielding to opportunity. You step into a caravan winding through Africa's interior. Camels sway, porters carry bundles, traders chant to keep pace. The land shifts around you, savanna rolling to jungle, desert stretching endless, mountains jagged on horizons. Each step feels vast, the scale humbling. Yet maps in Europe shrink it to lines, names, and colored patches. In markets you pass, ivory tusks gleam, rubber drips from trees, palm oil shimmers golden. The empire sees resources, fuel for industry, wealth for merchants. Local people see land turned strange, rhythms disrupted, demands heavy. You wander into Cairo, and the empire greets you with monuments old and new. The pyramids loom eternal, but beside them stand telegraph lines and soldiers drilling in the square. Britain, securing its path to India, occupies Egypt in 1882, controlling the Suez Canal, the shortcut of empire. From there, the dream grows, a red line stretching from Cape to Cairo, unbroken by rival flags. Here's another quirky fact. Cecil Rhodes, one of the empire's most fervent architects, once proposed a railway running the entire length of Africa, north to south. It was never fully built, but the dream lingered on maps, a steel spine imagined across deserts and jungles. And uncertainty? Did Britain truly believe in such grand schemes? Or were they propaganda to inspire investors? The railway became legend as much as plan, ambition outpacing reality. You pause in a village. Children run barefoot, women pound grain, elders sit beneath shade trees. Then soldiers arrive, local askaris under British command, marching in step, rifles gleaming. Behind them, administrators in white suits, ledgers in hand, ready to impose taxes, laws, authority. The rhythms change. Hut taxes force men into wage labor. Rubber quotas strip forests bare. Schools teach loyalty to empire. Resistance stirs, sometimes quiet, sometimes fierce. Here's your historical fact. Rebellions rose across Africa, such as the Maji uprising in German East Africa, or the Ashanti Wars against Britain. Empire was never smooth, it was always contested, and the quirky image. In some places, local rulers sent giraffes, ostriches, or carved ivory gifts to London as symbols of diplomacy. Odd tokens of ancient traditions reshaped by empire. Imagine a giraffe, tall and bewildered, walking off a ship in Southampton, its long neck stretching above crowds of astonished onlookers. And uncertainty. Did these gestures reflect genuine alliance or reluctant compliance under duress? The lines blur, diplomacy entwined with survival. You walk into Johannesburg during the gold rush. The air buzzes with hammering, shouting, deals struck in taverns. Dust clings to your skin, gold glints in pans, miners dig deep into earth. South Africa becomes another jewel, its mines pouring wealth outward. Yet alongside fortune comes bitterness. Labor exploited, divisions hardened. Segregation seeds are planted, long before names like apartheid take hold. The empire counts profits in London, but on the ground, lives fracture. Here's a quirky fact. In some colonial exhibitions back in Britain, entire African villages were recreated, complete with huts and native performers brought overseas. Crowds paid tickets to gawk, treating people as living displays. Imagine the surreal dissonance. Children eating sweets while watching others reenact daily life behind fences. And uncertainty. Did such displays reflect curiosity, racism, or both? Some say they were meant to educate, others see them as spectacle. The empire's gaze was always double. Fascination and distortion intertwined. Night falls across the savannah. Fires glow, drums beat, stars sprawl endlessly above. In London, lamps flicker in lecture halls where men debate civilizing missions. In Africa, mothers hush children to sleep, farmers till fields by dawn, rebels plot resistance in whispers. The Scramble redraws maps, but beneath the lines, life continues, enduring. The sun of empire burns bright here, but its shadows stretch long. You close your eyes, hearing both the scratch of pencils on Berlin maps and the rustle of grass in an African night. The Scramble hums on, driven by greed, justified by words, resisted by silence and storm alike. The air grows heavy with the sound of marching boots, drums beating, trumpets blaring. It is 1914, and you stand in a European square where soldiers gather, flags fluttering, bands playing patriotic songs. The Great War has begun, and though the fighting is in Europe's trenches, the empire feels its weight everywhere. The sun may not set on its lands, but clouds of smoke and sorrow drift across every horizon. In London, recruiting posters line walls, calling on colonials to serve. The empire needs you, they proclaim. And from Canada, Australia, India, Africa, men answer. You see them boarding ships, turbans, and slouch hats beside khaki caps, all bound for a war thousands of miles from home. The empire stretches not only across maps, but across armies. Here's your historical fact. More than 2.5 million men from India served in the British forces during the First World War, fighting in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And the quirky detail? Soldiers from India sometimes wrote home describing snow for the first time, amazed and bewildered by the cold, white world of European winters. One man called it frozen cotton that bites. As for uncertainty, historians still ask whether these soldiers fought out of loyalty, coercion, or necessity. Were they driven by pride, poverty, or pressure? Likely all at once. Each man's story different, each enlistment its own puzzle. You walk now along a trench in France. Mud sucks at your boots, the air reeks of gunpowder and rot. Men huddle in dugouts, their rifles stacked, their eyes hollow. Among them are Canadians who braved Ypres, Australians who fought at Gallipoli, Indians enduring the cold with only thin coats. The Empire's sons stand side by side, though their homes lie oceans apart. At night, the guns fall silent, and you hear whispers in many tongues. Hindi, French, English, Swahili. Men murmuring prayers, letters written by candle stubs, songs hummed low. Even in the darkest mud, the Empire breathes through its diversity. Back in the colonies, the war changes life too. In factories, workers toil longer, producing uniforms, rifles, shells. Women take jobs once denied them, driving trams, working in munitions. In villages, taxes rise, harvests demanded, sons conscripted. The war's reach is total, its demands unrelenting. Here's another quirky fact. In Australia, the war was so divisive that 2 national referendums on conscription both failed. Many Australians supported the Empire, yet balked at forcing men to serve. Democracy and loyalty collided, leaving bitterness in their wake and uncertainty. Did the war strengthen colonial bonds or strain them? For some, shared sacrifice deepened ties. For others, the sight of blood spilled for Britain bred resentment. Questions that would echo long after. The war ends in 1918, but the Empire is not the same. Victorious, yes, but shaken. The map changes again. New territories carved from the defeated. Mandates in the Middle East, islands in the Pacific. The red expands, yet the cracks widen. In India, the call for independence grows louder. In Ireland, rebellion erupts. In Africa, protests stir. The Empire's triumph tastes of exhaustion. You wander through London in 1919, the streets filled with parades. Soldiers march, bands play, crowds cheer. But behind the cheers are empty chairs at tables, photographs draped with black, wounds that will never heal. The Empire has survived the Great War, but it has also aged. Here's your historical fact. During the interwar years, Britain controlled nearly a quarter of the world's population and land, its empire at its peak in size. And the quirky detail? At the 1924 British Empire exhibition in Wembley, organizers built a palace of industry so large it contained an entire locomotive inside, showcasing Empire's might. Visitors strolled pavilions from India, Africa, Canada, marveling at the illusion of unity and uncertainty. Was this unity real or theater? Historians debate whether the Empire truly functioned as a cooperative commonwealth, or whether it was showmanship masking fractures. The Wembley exhibition sparkled, but unrest simmered outside. Then comes another war. In 1939, the world burns again, and the Empire must fight once more. This time, the colonies' role is even greater. Indian troops march through deserts against Rommel's forces. African soldiers serve in Burma. Canadians storm Juno Beach on D-Day. The Empire throws its weight across every front, but the strain is immense. London itself is bombed, its docks aflame, its people huddling in shelters. Colonies feel the war in rationing, in shortages, in sons never returning. The Empire endures, but it bends, stretched too thin. Here's another quirky fact. During World War II, some Indian regiments marched into battles singing songs from Bollywood films, their voices rising above gunfire. Music carried them through chaos, blending modern culture with ancient courage and uncertainty. Did the Second World War seal the empire's fate? Some argue victory reinforced Britain's pride. Others say the cost was too high, the colonies too emboldened, the balance too fragile. What is certain? After 1945, the sun began to dip. You sit now at twilight in 1947 in Delhi once more. Crowds surge, flags wave, the air hums with jubilation and sorrow. India declares independence, partition splits the land, millions move across new borders. The jewel of the crown slips away, and with it, something fundamental shifts. The empire is no longer eternal. In Africa, in the Caribbean, in Asia, voices rise. Calls for freedom, for dignity, for nations of their own. Britain listens, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes proudly. One by one, the red fades from the map. At night, you stand before a map again. The red lines are still there, but thinner, fainter. They no longer blaze with certainty. The empire has weathered 2 wars, reached its height, and now feels the pull of sunset. The sun still shines, but lower now, softer, preparing to slip beneath horizons. You close your eyes, hearing echoes of boots on parade, whispers in trenches, cheers at exhibitions, chants of independence in crowded streets. The Great War, the next war, the strains of victory and loss. They are all woven into this twilight. The map before you looks different now. Where once seas of red stretched bold across continents, there are gaps, pale patches, new flags fluttering where the Union Jack once flew. The empire that claimed the sun never set has entered twilight. Yet even as colonies gain independence, the echoes remain, woven into language, law, railways, sports, habits, and stories. The sun sets on territory, but not entirely on influence. You walk through London in the 1950s, and the change is already visible. Buses rumble through smoky streets, but aboard them ride men and women from Jamaica, from India, from Nigeria, migrants answering the call to rebuild Britain after war. They carry with them music, food, and memory. The empire once reached out across the globe. Now the globe comes to its heart. London becomes mosaic, layered, no longer just British, but quietly global. Here's your historical fact. In 1949, Britain and several former colonies formed the Commonwealth of Nations, a voluntary association that kept ties alive even as formal empire receded. Today, more than 50 countries belong, linked not by conquest, but by choice, at least in name. And the quirky detail? At the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953, newly independent India insisted on attending the Commonwealth ceremony, but as a republic, not as a monarchy. So officials devised a new phrase, calling the Queen head of the Commonwealth, a title invented almost on the spot, blending tradition with improvisation. As for uncertainty, historians still debate whether the Commonwealth is meaningful cooperation or symbolic nostalgia. Is it a real bond or just an echo? A polite afterimage of empire. You step onto a cricket pitch in Kingston, Jamaica. The crowd roars as batsmen strike, the ball flying under Caribbean sun. Cricket, once imposed, has become beloved. Teams from former colonies beat England at its own game, the stadiums erupting with joy. The echo of empire is playful, ironic, a bat swung in defiance as much as tradition. Then you drift into Lagos, Nigeria, where courts still follow English law, judges in wigs presiding. Into Delhi, where English remains a language of government. Into Sydney, where school children still debate Shakespeare. The threads are countless, woven through daily life. Here's another quirky fact. In some African towns, Locals gave English place names new twists, pronouncing them in rhythms of their own. Manchester might become Manchester. Liverpool softened with lilting tones. The empire's tongue lived on, but reshaped, made local. And uncertainty? Were these adoptions remnants of empire's grip or tools of empowerment? Some argue English gave access to global arenas. Others see it as lingering domination. The truth, as ever, lies in the blend. You sit in a quiet library now, shelves stacked with books. Sagas of empire line the walls, histories, memoirs, novels. Kipling's verses praising the white man's burden sit beside Orwell's biting critiques. Conrad's tales of rivers and darkness whisper alongside Naipaul's reflections of exile. The empire survives not only in structures, but in stories, in words written by both rulers and ruled. At night, you wander a railway platform in Nairobi. A train whistles, steam hisses, lamps flicker. You think of the rails laid by colonial hands, once meant for empire's commerce, now carrying schoolchildren, traders, workers in nations of their own. Tools outlive empires, purposes shift, echoes remain. Here's another quirky image. In some former colonies, British ceremonial rituals linger even today. Like soldiers marching in bearskin hats under blazing tropical sun, a pageantry borrowed wholesale from London. The sight is both solemn and surreal. Empire's theater replayed under different skies and uncertainty. Did empire end in the mid-20th century? Or does it live on in subtler forms, economic, cultural, political? Scholars debate whether decolonization was an ending, a transformation, or simply a change of costume. The sun sets now across the world. You sit by the Thames, its waters dark, its bridges lit with lamps. Once, this river carried ships that ruled oceans. Now, its tides carry tourists on ferries, commuters in trains, students walking along banks. The empire has receded, but its echoes ripple here still. You hear them in accents shaped by faraway lands, in food steaming from street stalls, in music rising from pubs and clubs. You hear them in debates of parliament, in sporting rivalries, in poems, in stories. The empire of the sun never sets, not because it still rules, but because its traces linger in countless small ways. You close your eyes, and you see the ark again. The first ships leaving Tudor docks, the sugar islands, the forts of Africa, the palaces of India, the Opium Wars, the red lines on maps, the trenches of Europe, the parades of independence. Each moment now a memory, each echo a reminder. The empire is gone, but it is not forgotten. It endures in language, in law, in tea steaming in cups, in cricket balls flying, in railways humming, in maps yellowing in libraries. The sun never sets completely on memory.